Ever get that feeling? Like there's something else going on beneath the surface. An unseen architecture, maybe, shaping what we believe, how we feel.
Uh-huh. It's a fascinating idea.
Well, today, we're really diving into that. We're looking at a source that calls this the grid, a kind of psychic framework woven right into, well, everything, our societies.
And what's interesting right off the bat is this isn't framed as, some shadowy group pulling strings. It's presented more as a natural outcome of how we humans structure ourselves.
Exactly, like an invisible scaffolding holding up our shared reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not static either, our source for today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty unusual document, actually. It's called The Grid and the Mind, a manual of psychic Aikido, mental mining, and reality modulation. Quite a title.
Definitely suggests a different way of looking at things.
It really does. And it proposes that we can actually interact with this grid. Subtly, maybe, but meaningfully. So we're going to unpack some of these core ideas. Psychic Aikido, mental mining, what do they even mean?
Which, raises the question right away. If this grid thing exists, how would we even notice it? What would its influence look like in our daily lives?
That's exactly what we're getting into. The source offers this, well, metaphysical perspective on how shared realities form, and hints at ways to engage with it. So think of this as a guided tour.
Yeah.
Maybe through a different lens on the world. Might spark some aha moments, hopefully without being too overwhelming.
Okay.
All right, so let's get into it. This grid, what exactly is it according to this manual?
So the manual defines it as a psychic architecture, but crucially it's not physical stuff like wires or buildings.
Right.
It's described as being encoded within our human systems. So think government, media, economics, religion, even art trends.
Okay, so less concrete, more like the patterns and assumptions embedded in those systems.
Exactly. And its main job, the text says, is to act as a field for pattern recognition and, get this, consensus binding illusions.
Consensus binding illusions. Wow. So basically keeping everyone roughly on the same page about reality.
Pretty much. Stabilizing beliefs, filtering out stuff that doesn't fit the main story, preventing what the source calls psychic singularities.
Psychic singularities, like big breaks in reality.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine a sudden, massive shift in a core societal belief. That could be one. It's about preventing those disruptions to the shared understanding.
Okay, almost like society's immune system, trying to maintain the status quo belief-wise. How does it do that? What's the mechanism?
It's mainly through constant belief reinforcement, feedback loops.
Oh, okay.
Every conversation, every ritual, even, the algorithms feeding us stuff online, it all contributes. You see things that match what you already think, that reinforces it, and round it goes.
That makes a lot of sense. Like seeing the same headline over and over subtly shapes how you see an issue.
Right.
The source also uses an analogy.
Yeah.
A crystal lattice. What's that about?
Yeah, the crystal lattice idea is to explain how the grid might amplify and channel energy, just like a crystal directs light or energy along specific paths. The grid channels, let's say, social or psychic energy along the existing lines of dominant beliefs and patterns. So reinforcing those beliefs makes those paths stronger, harder for new ideas to break through.
Gotcha. Okay, so we have this grid, this web of beliefs. Then the manual talks about mental mining. What is that? It sounds like digging for thoughts.
It's sort of like that, yeah. Mental mining is described as psychically extracting things from this collective environment. Ideas, patterns, emotions, beliefs.
Not literally digging them.
No. More like a subtle, intuitive process, tuning in and drawing these things out from beneath the surface noise, maybe?
So tapping into deeper currents of thought and feeling. What sort of things can be mined? The source lists a few types.
Yeah, it does. First, mimetic fragments. Think of these as tiny, powerful units of culture or thought. Slogans, catchphrases, idioms, viral ideas, the little things that really stick and shape how we think.
Like mental earworms that influence us without us realizing.
Kind of, yeah. Little building blocks of belief. Understanding them helps you see, maybe, the subtle nudges in media or ads.
Okay, what else?
Then there's emotional sediment. This is, leftover emotional energy. It can get stuck in places or linked to people or even trapped in, recurring collective memories. The manual suggests you can perceive this, maybe even work with it.
Huh. Emotions leaving a psychic residue. Interesting image. What about language? It mentions symbolic drift.
Right. Symbolic drift is about how the meanings of words and symbols change over time in a culture.
Oh, yeah.
The example given is freedom, what it meant in, say, 1990 versus 2025. Those shifts tell you a lot about depper changes in values and beliefs.
So the same word carries different baggage depending on when you use it. Fascinating. And the last one was cognitive echoes.
Yeah, cognitive echoes. These are like outdated beliefs or patterns that just hang around in media, social narratives, even how individuals think. Old national myths, maybe, or traditions people follow, even if the original reason is gone.
Like mental inertia.
Yeah.
Old ideas still bouncing around even if they don't quite fit anymore.
Exactly.
So if you wanted to try this mental mining, what skills would you need?
The manual stresses perception beyond narrative, seeing past the main stories we tell. Also, silent awareness, metaphor sensitivity, tuning into symbolic language, and multidimensional listening, hearing the unspoken stuff.
Right, paying attention on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears. Psychic Aikido sounds dynamic,
Yeah.
but it's described as non-resistant perception manipulation. What's that about?
Yeah, the core idea is redirection, not fighting against things directly, like the martial art, Aikido.
You use the opponent's energy.
Exactly. You blend with their force, use their momentum. So, in the psychic sense, it's about subtly blending with existing energies or ideas rather than just pushing back hard.
So a more indirect way to influence things, less confrontational maybe.
Yeah.
What are the principles?
There are a few key ones. One is energetic mimesis, basically mirroring the prevailing belief or feeling in a system, but without actually absorbing it yourself.
Okay.
It lets you understand the system's dynamics, get access, without setting off alarms. The text gives an example, like nodding along in a group ritual, seeming to agree, but maybe subtly slipping in different metaphors that could gently shift assumptions later.
Finding common ground to introduce a slight twist without immediate rejection. Got it. What about symbolic redirection?
That's about using the system's own language and symbols, but tweaking them slightly. Encoding new meanings, maybe reframing a slogan, nudging a definition, introducing small paradoxes. The key is aiming for slight divergence. Not a total revolution, which would just get shut down. It's like steering a huge ship, tiny adjustments over time.
Gentle nudging of the narrative, okay. Then there's perceptual misdirection.
This one's about not directly challenging the main consensus. Instead, you introduce alternatives subtly, maybe metaphorically, so they slip past the conscious defenses. The manual has a great line. A truth whispered in metaphor will outlive a shouted fact.
Wow. Planting seeds rather than arguing. That really speaks to the subtlety of it. And the last one, evaporative opposition. Sounds paradoxical.
It does. It's about dealing with conflict by offering zero direct resistance. Instead, you sort of absorb the energy of the attack and reflect it back within their system.
How does that work?
The idea is, without that external pushback, internal contradictions or dissonance might start to build up within their own viewpoint over time.
So by not fighting, you create internal friction for them. Interesting. Okay, so we've got the grid, metal mining, psychic Aikido. The manual then talks about navigating the currents of existence. What are these currents?
It pictures the collective mind like a big ocean full of these interconnected current, emotional, ideological currents. Understanding how they flow is key to navigating the grid.
Okay, and what kinds of currents are there?
It lists a few. Emotional currents. These are generated by big shared experiences. Think major news events, collective traumas, big celebrations, even just seasonal feelings or memory.
Right, like the mood around holidays or anniversaries.
Exactly. Then narrative currents. These are the big ideologies, belief systems, origin stories, the truths held up by institutions.
And dominant stories we live by.
And finally, temporal currents. These are the rhythms built into time itself, calendar cycles, anniversaries again, the way collective attention shifts focus over weeks or months.
So it's this constantly shifting sea of shared thoughts, feelings, stories, and rhythms. How can we use this understanding? It mentions current redirection.
Yeah, that's about gently guiding these currents. The analogy is like placing stones in a stream to subtly change its path.
How would you do that psychically?
Through symbolic placement and emotional resonance. Maybe introducing a new ritual into a community. Something designed to subtly shift the feeling associated with a specific time of year or event.
Consciously using symbols to nudge collective feelings. That's quite something. What if currents get stuck or negative? It talks about loop collapsing.
Right. Sometimes beliefs or emotional patterns become self-feeding loops, right? They just reinforce themselves. Trauma leading to fear, leading to control, maybe.
Yeah, you see those patterns.
So collapsing these loops might involve introducing a contradiction. The text calls it a mind virus, which sounds dramatic. Yeah. Or offering an alternative way to resolve the tension, or just making the loop visible to people caught in it. But gently, Show, don't tell, it advises. It's about breaking that automatic cycle.
Disrupting the negative feedback. Okay. And finally, under navigating currents, there's ripple creation. Sounds gentler.
It is. This is about how small inputs can sometimes create huge resonance. A poem, a phrase, an image, an event. If it taps into some unspoken need or buried collective feeling, it can spread far beyond the initial act.
Like hitting just the right note.
Exactly. But the manual stresses you can't force these. You seed them with intention, then you have to let them go, see if they resonate, like dropping a pebble in a pond and watching the waves.
Okay. Now the manual moves to something that sounds more active. Insertion of new templates into group minds.
Yeah, this section uses an analogy of group minds being like shared software. There's a base operating system made of myths, language, shared traumas.
The cultural programming.
Right, and the idea is if you understand that code, you might be able to introduce new templates, new ways of processing things.
What are the methods for this insertion?
One is mimetic Trojan horses. Hiding a new idea inside something familiar and accepted. A meme, a movie plot, a joke, even branding. The new idea gets smuggled in.
Clever.
Another is narrative reframing, offering different explanations for things, like framing rebellion not as bad, but as creative, or leadership not as command, but as emotional honesty. Repackaging ideas to make them land differently.
Changing the frame of reference. Makes sense. What about using symbols directly? Symbol encoding.
Yes. The idea here is that symbols carry payloads of meaning and feeling. Colors, animals, shapes, numbers. You could potentially craft or highlight specific symbols to act like psychic apps.
Whoa.
Over time, the theory goes, these consciously deployed symbols could subtly shift how people perceive reality.
Designing symbols to influence perception. That's a big idea. And the last method here is pretty out there. Dream dissemination.
It is. The manual gets quite speculative here. It suggests, hypothetically, working with a very specific type of person, a local psychic, described in a particular way to use dream modulation, to introduce templates into the collective dreamscape.
Why dreams?
The thinking is that the grid's defenses might be lower at night, and these specific individuals might act as unconscious broadcasters. It's definitely pushing into less conventional territory.
For sure. Okay, moving on. Emission of clarity fields within noisy environments. What's a clarity field?
Imagine environments just overwhelmed with psychic noise, conflicting beliefs, media overload, emotional chaos.
So familiar.
Right. So a clarity field is described as an energetic emission from an individual that can help stabilize that chaos. Like a tuning fork, bring things back into harmony, but energetically. It restores a kind of symmetry and coherence locally.
But how do you emit one?
It involves getting into a state of mental stillness, a zero thought state, the text calls it. No attachment to personal stories or the surrounding chaos.
Okay.
From there, you silently hold a pure archetypal resonance, like truth, compassion, balance, and then acting or speaking with symbolic precision and real emotional integrity helps project that field outwards.
So it's about embodying stillness and coherence yourself, and that influences the space around you.
Yeah.
Interesting. Even if people don't consciously notice.
The effect might be subtle or delayed, yeah.
Now, with all this potential influence, the manual talks about evading detection. Invisible mental devices. Why the need for invisibility?
Well, the grid, being about stability, monitors for threats, right? Anything seen as too disruptive, too overt, too fast, too different could trigger defenses. Censorship, ridicule, being shut out.
The immune system kicking in again.
Exactly. So, invisible mental devices are psychological strategies to fly under that radar.
Okay, like what are these devices?
One is perception cloaking. Basically, making yourself or your ideas seem harmless. Maybe funny, artistic, even confused. Humor and metaphor are good cloaks, it says. Symbolic messages don't raise red flags like direct challenges do. Another is subsymbolic transmission, using color, form, sound, things that bypass language and conscious filters to resonate emotionally.
Communicating on a nonverbal, less threatening level.
Gotcha.
What about working within existing systems? It mentions ideological mimicry.
Yeah, this is temporarily adopting the language and surface beliefs of a system so you can introduce different ideas from the inside.
Sounds risky.
It does. The manual warns strongly about not getting stuck there, not actually internalizing the beliefs you're mimicking. And finally, dream protocols, again using archetypal symbols in art or media to subtly influence the collective dream space, seen as a weaker point for the grid.
Wow. A lot of very subtle strategic thinking there. Finally, though, the manual wraps up with responsibility and integration. Seems essential given everything else.
Absolutely crucial. The text really emphasizes that playing with perception and belief comes with big responsibilities. As you get better at influencing things, the question, why am I doing this, becomes central.
All right.
It stresses needing deep self awareness, staying connected to your own core values, not just getting lost in the grid's reflections.
And what does it offer as anchors? Safeguards.
It points to grounding yourself in truth, but a truth beyond just stories and narratives. In silence, stillness beyond constant thought. And in love, a connection deeper than just sentiment. These are presented as the fundamental safeguards.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into the grid and the mind, we've explored this idea of a psychic infrastructure, this malleable grid, and these ways to potentially interact with it psychic Aikido, mental mining. It's quite a framework.
It really is. What stands out is the implication that we're all participating in this, consciously or not, constantly shaping and being shaped by this grid.
Yeah, it reframes things. Makes you think about yourself maybe as a, what did it say, a silent architect or quiet poet of collective mind.
That's the phrase. It invites a different kind of awareness, doesn't it?
It really does. Which leaves a thought for you listening. If these subtle currents and structures are at play, how might you tune into them more? In your own life, in the world. So as you go about your day, maybe just consider those invisible currents. The manual suggests profound change might start small. A quiet intention, a symbolic act that resonates. The future, it suggests, well, it might just be listening.